The death of a spouse is one of the most stressful events a person can experience, and that stress goes beyond the emotional. It often includes financial stress. With some of those stressors, well, they're unavoidable, but a lot can be more easily navigated if there is a plan in place. And today we will get advice in advance from experts on the financial changes that occur when a spouse passes and some ways you can prepare. I'm Patrice Sikora with Rachel Rasmussen and Joe Patterson from Foster and Motley. Rachel and Joe, thank you so much for being here because this can be a tough topic. So, Rachel, let's start with you. Where does someone begin with this?
Oh, yeah. Patrice, this is a very tough topic. It's a very hard topic to think about. And obviously, no one likes talking about it. But it's an issue that many of us will face sometime in our lifetime if we have a partner or a spouse, is what happens when they pass away before you, when they predecease you. So it's a tough topic, but it's one that Joe and I work with clients on. We help them through some really tough times. And so talking about this today hopefully will help you get mentally prepared or do things in advance to make sure that you and your partner are well prepared for when this inevitably happens. So I would say the first piece of advice is don't do anything quickly. The inclination is this horrible thing has happened. What do I have to do? And then that turns into panic. And we don't want that. We don't want to make panic decisions. We don't want to make hasty decisions. We want to take our time. So don't do anything rash is basically what we would lead with. Don't think about moving. Don't think about huge, large expenses. Try to avoid adding stress to what is already a very difficult situation. Avoid making those big decisions in that stressful period. Don't add anything to your plate.
All right, but then what happens? I mean, you can sit down and not make big decisions, but there are lots of little ones, I'm sure, that come up.
And this is the part where you're not making decisions because you've already planned. So here is the time to implement the plan that you've already put in place. And that's something that we would be working with the clients on. So ideally, you've already thought about it. You already know what the steps are going to be. But of course, this isn't always the case. Step one, you're going to inform your key helpers. Who are the people who are going to help get you through this? You cannot do this alone. So think about who those people might be. They would be your financial advisor, like Joe or I, your attorney, perhaps a funeral director that you've already picked out your funeral plan, your accountant, and of course, immediate next of kin. Contact them, let them know, let them be aware so they can help support you as a friend or as a trusted advisor. And then the second thing, Joe helps with a lot, which is making sure you have access to cash.
You don't think about that.
Yeah, it's a great point, Rachel. So, to Patrice's note here, it's easy to overlook basic things in a time that's stressful and emotionally draining. You got to have cash on hand to function and exist. So, one thing we often tell our clients to do, and this goes back to the planning element, this is an easy one, is keep money in a joint bank account. So, regardless of how you organize your finances, a lot of couples have joint bank accounts. Some couples have individual accounts that they fund each month and they spend what they need from each of their own individual accounts. But if, let's say, the spending comes from one account, let's say it's the spouse that passed away, the second that they passed and the bank knows about it, they'll shut down that account. So we don't want that. We want things that keep moving and keep, being needed to just continue on as is. So ideally, you have a joint bank account. If your spouse passes away, then the surviving spouse gets immediate ownership of the account. So there should be no interruption. And that's a good reason to make that account your central point of let's pay bills from this account. Let's pay our utilities, right? So we don't want any interruptions. Interruptions are going to cause stress. Let's avoid stress. So that's a big one. There's some additional steps beyond that, again, to Rachel's point, if there's a plan in place, That's great. You're following the plan. You have a team of people helping you. But if you didn't have a plan, which happens, like, life isn't perfect. We try to make plans and have the best intentions, but sometimes it doesn't work out. So in order to keep the finances moving, and by moving, I mean, if your spouse dies, regardless of how you have assets titled, there's a decent chance they may have had assets in their name that are going to go to you, whether it's by title, like a beneficiary designation on an IRA, by trust, or by transfer on death designation, or payable on death designation. All those things can happen. You're going to need death certificates. And that's something that the funeral home should be able to help you out with. So we usually request that clients request 10 copies, because a lot of times the bank, the custodian, so we work with Schwab as our custodian, they're going to want a copy of that death certificate, a certified copy. So you will have those in hand to give to the various places that need them. And again, that is to help you keep accounts moving along, getting transferred. So those are the kind of the first things, is make sure money is, where it needs to be. You still got to pay for your bills. You still got to keep the lights on. All those things have to continue regardless of all the stuff you're working through.
Wow. Okay. So we've gotten up to keep some liquid money around. You've got death certificates. Now, you're talking about the money in the banks. What kind of steps do you take there?
Yeah. So you're going to need to go, and this is where helpers can come into play. You're going to need to communicate to all of the institutions where you hold assets. So banks, you will need to, let's say you have a joint bank account, you'll still need to produce a death certificate, because now it's going to be your account individually. If your spouse had an account in their own name, or CDs at a bank in their own name, hopefully there's a payable on death designation. So you can add that for any bank account, including CDs, and say, hey, at my passing, I want this to be paid to my spouse. But you'll still need to show record of your spouse passing, so that the bank will then say, okay, well, now it's your assets and we'll transfer the title. Same with custodians, same with brokerage accounts, same with retirement accounts. So again, ideally, we've got these all titled with respect to the title and beneficiary, how we want them, so that they go to our spouse and they're taken care of. But nothing will happen without record of the death certificate in the hands of the custodians and the banks. So that's one. So that's just actual accounts, right? Because then there's also income streams. So again, this goes to the keeping the lights on discussion. Social Security, that's a big one. So in many cases, one spouse has a higher Social Security benefit than the other does. So you have one spouse who's been the primary earner. They have a substantive Social Security benefit. Many times the other spouse, who has been charged with taking care of the house, taking care of kids, doesn't have a big benefit, but they're entitled to have their spouse's benefit during their own lifetime. When their spouse with the higher benefit passes away, then the surviving spouse is entitled to the full benefit. So we want to keep income streams flowing, so to speak. And this one's going to be a little more work, because you're going to have to let, Social Security office is going to get word that your spouse has passed, because your funeral home should let them know. But you'll still need to make a connection with the Social Security office, which is more and more challenging, because it's hard to get someone on the phone. It's hard to get an appointment, facing staffing issues that are just getting worse over time. But that's an important one. Does your spouse have a pension? So pensions are still pretty common among retired folks. They're less and less common among people who have yet to retire, but there's a decent chance you might have a pension, or your spouse has a pension. So depending on again, this goes back to planning, depending on the pension election, the surviving spouse could be entitled to anywhere from 0 to 100% of that pension. Now, hopefully it's closer to 100 than 0. We see very few people, and probably recommend very few people, give their spouse a 0% survivor benefit, but it is an option. These are things to, if you can't always, you don't know when someone's going to go, but if you know someone is not doing well, then these are things we, want to just at least understand. Once you make that pension benefit election, though, when you start that pension, wherever that was, there's no changing it. So, but at least you'll know what it is. So again, to get those payments from the spouse who passed away to the surviving spouse needs a death certificate, need to go to the company that's administering the pension, give them the information so that they can get that set up and continue that payment to your bank.
And these are things that we help with. We help clients all the time fill out paperwork because sometimes it can just feel very overwhelming, all of the packs of paper and how to do it correctly, especially if you're tired or just feeling exhausted. So the other kinds of income streams that we're helping with would be portfolio distributions. So that's something that I'm going to look at in a client's portfolio. Where are they currently getting money on a monthly basis? Perhaps they're taking withdrawals. Is it coming from an IRA, a retirement account? Is that in the name of the person who's deceased or the current living spouse? So we have to make sure that you're continuing to get money. Also looking at joint accounts as well. So we work with our custodian to help make sure that you continue seeing that cash come in. We may do a huge lump sum of cash just to get it into your bank account so you have it, knowing that you might have some elevated expenses for a few months as you kind of work through funeral process. That cost money, or perhaps there's medical bills. So we want to help with that. The other thing is, let's say your spouse or your partner was working at the time and had earned income. So that's going to go away. Now you have to think about where else is this money going to come from to meet your living needs. If the income is going away, that doesn't mean that all aspects of their employment income would go away, such as deferred compensation. Perhaps there's some stock options or other payouts that the surviving spouse would be entitled to. So having a good balance sheet, which is something that we do through the financial planning process, having that in place helps us do an inventory of all that currently exists so we don't miss anything. And this is the part where we kind of go back to that balance sheet and say, okay, let's go one by one. How are we going to make sure this ends up where it needs to end up and you have what you need to meet your bills?
Now, if you have a plan, what kind of time frame are we looking at? And if you don't have a plan, what kind of time frame are we looking at?
Whew, that varies. I think we've seen anything from a month to a year plus.
Oh,
A lot of it depends on how complicated it is and how buttoned up were the beneficiary paperwork prior to this occurring. Were there trust accounts involved? Are we going to have some irrevocable trusts that occur? Not like we need to understand every aspect of it, but this is why having an advisor, you can talk through this. Okay, if if and when this happens, what is going to be complicated, what will take a while. And so that's why we'll sometimes get family members involved so they understand, here's how you're going to help mom or dad or aunt or uncle get through this. This is how it's going to mechanically work. And sometimes that communication can shorten the amount of time. Don't you think, Joe? What's been your
Yeah,
experience?
unfortunately, there is significant variability among different institutions. And I wish there was some sort of standard. It seems like that would be helpful. But sometimes we'll submit a transfer for assets for another custodian, let's say if we're consolidating accounts. Sometimes it comes over in a week. Sometimes it comes over in a month or a month and a half. So there's life insurance is, Rachel mentioned payouts, life insurance. Um, again, you submit a death certificate to us. It seems like it's pretty straightforward, but those life insurance payouts are highly variable in the timing. So again, could be a couple weeks, could be months. And to Rachel's point, if there's complicated accounts involved, which for most folks there aren't, but for some folks there are, then, or we're looking at, let's say, is it helpful to file an alternate estate tax return? Then we are looking at potentially talking about months and years. But most of the time, this stuff can happen quickly. Joint bank account, no interruption. Transfer of accounts where beneficiaries are in place, 2 to 4 weeks. And
you,
those
you
things
mentioned,
can happen quickly.
and you mentioned rightly so, the continuation of a stream of income and mentioning paying bills. What do you do when maybe your name isn't on the bill? Should you go and change that or just kind of let it ride if you're going to be moving anyway?
You bring up such a good point, Patrice. We've seen that this takes more time than we would have anticipated. Let's say the cell phone bill is in your spouse's name. It's very difficult to, once you let them know, okay, this person's no longer, they're going to cut the phone off. So how do you get access to all the passwords that might be stored in the phone? Or how do you move it to your name? Do you have to start a whole new account? So what we've heard recently is that people are adding authorized users if possible, so that you can be the one to speak to the utility company, the electric company, the cell phone, etc. So that there's no interruption and you can switch the name on the account to you. If you don't do that, well, it can take a lot of time, and no one wants to be on the phone to an energy company for hours on end. So if you can avoid that at all, that will save you a lot of time by adding authorized users. And then, of course, just having an idea of what is an auto pay versus what you actually need to go and do. Let's say your spouse was the one who typically paid the bills. You really need to have a conversation with them today about how do they do that? Do they go online and pay it? Does it automatically come out of the account? What happens if the account gets closed? Well, then that auto debit gets broken. So you're going to have to go in and relink that. So it's a bit of a laundry list. So keeping an inventory of all those different payments can really save you a lot of headache down the line.
There's a couple of things that come to mind here on top of Rachel's really helpful points. One is if to keep time on your side with bills, the utility companies, cell phone, Verizon, cell phone companies, they don't know what they don't know. So if no one tells them that somebody has passed away, and keep paying things as they are and leave them uninterrupted. So this is an item. Now, the caveat there is it needs to come from a bank account that is not getting closed. So if you have a joint account and you're simply renaming the account in the individual name and keeping that account, which a lot of banks will do, then you can keep the payments going, pay the bills, pay the cell phone bill, all those things, pay the utilities, right? Credit cards. So credit card companies also don't know what they don't know, and they won't know that the person who owns the account has passed away until you tell them. So that is an important thing to keep in mind, is that you don't have to rush to do these things as long as the account that they're all linked to with the auto pays is in place. So you get a little time, and that's helpful potentially. But unfortunately, like Rachel said, there's no joint utility accounts. There's no joint cell phone accounts. It's in one name or the other. Having an authorized user is ideal for the reasons that Rachel shared, but that's not always the case. So sometimes you have to start from, okay, well, we didn't do all these things, right? We didn't make the best possible plans, and that's okay. There is this other piece that we're thinking about that's not a bill, but it's potentially ties this all together, and it depends on how, electronically online savvy you are. Because I think about my accounts, everything is auto pay, everything's tied to a bank account, everything, review the auto pay, see our episode on online
Yes,
security
yes.
separately. But I don't go in and hand pay every bill every month. I'd lose my mind. But that's not true of many people. So there is some middle ground probably out there too, where some accounts are easy and they're paid by hand. You can at least clean those up. There are some that are online, but the key here is passwords. So we've talked about password management, knowing where your spouse has the passwords. Ideally, you use a tool to share them, but at worst case, it's on a sheet. You know where the sheet is. Those are going to be critical because it's going to allow you to make changes much easier. If you have online access, you can do things quicker. You don't have to get on the phone and hope to talk to a person, or go into an office and hope to find somebody helpful, which you may or may not be the case, but that takes time. So if you're helpers, your kids, let's say, you can lean on them for some of the tech expertise and sort some of this stuff out via online accounts. That's really helpful. Like I said, even if it's a piece of paper, I have clients who keep it all on a piece of paper, but they know where the paper is. So, and they've told their kids where it is. So that's a lot better than keeping it up here. We've recommended using password managers where you can share passwords among family members because you're also talking about online pictures, right? Online social media accounts. Those are all stuff that in theory you want to control to some degree on behalf of your spouse. You want to close them, whatever you want to do with them. If you don't have access, it's really hard to get it. So keep that in mind.
You mentioned a number of good things here, very helpful steps. Having a meeting with your spouse, of course, begins everything, but the online passwords, the authorized users, I think that's a great idea. What about the POAs, the estate planning docs? Everybody should know where they all are, I would assume.
I would say so. Talk about where do you keep the signed copies? More times than not, we've been talking to kids of clients who have since passed and they don't know where those are. They're talking to the attorney and saying, "Well, do you have it?" "Well, I have a copy, but we gave the originals to your folks." So have a conversation with your next of kin about where you keep these important documents and make sure that they have access to get into it. If you put it in a safe, well, make sure they'll be able to find the password to the safe or the combination to the safe. Those sort of things. So what we want to do is put everything in place before it becomes an issue. So, talking to your advisor about making sure you have power of attorney on file, your estate planning documents have been reviewed recently. We try to look at those every 5 years because life changes, maybe your wishes change. Make sure that those updated copies are kept on file. In fact, we will keep electronic copies for clients in the event that they need them. They say they're at a hospital and, hey, I need my healthcare power of attorney. Can you please send this over quickly so we can help out in that way as well? And the same thing with updating estate planning documents. Those are only as good as the paper they're written on unless you have actually taken the action steps to implement them. And what I mean by that is make sure the account titling matches the estate planning documents intent. So putting joint title, putting payable on death, putting beneficiaries on your IRAs, making sure that its brokerage account is in the name of the trust. A lot of the times, the estate planning process will give you instructions, and then the financial advisor will help implement those instructions with your financial custodians.
Joe, anything to add here? I mean, I'm thinking you really need to do this in advance. Don't wait till the last minute, as Rachel was saying.
Yeah, that's the recurring theme for today. Do it in advance, right? Get your plan in place. But then there is this second round of so we've covered a lot of nuts and bolts stuff so far, making sure that you don't get disrupted in your day to day. You can pay your bills. You're not going to worry about not having enough money. Those are things that need to be addressed quickly. Getting accounts in your name transferred, all that stuff we just talked about. There's a second round, kind of level 2, if you will, of, well, okay, now we went from a team of 2 to a team of 1. And your team of 1, as we've shared, you have people hopefully to lean on, uh, whether it's your advisor, your CPA, your family, your friends, hopefully some combination thereof. But now we need to look at what your team of 1 looks like from a financial perspective. So probably you've named your spouse in all your estate planning documents as your primary person, right? Powers of attorney, your wills. If you have separate trusts, or even if you have the same trust, your spouse is likely playing a key lead role in all those documents. So at some point, and this could be again, not right away, first 6 months, let's say, even 12 months, but not more than that. Let's get new estate planning documents. Let's make sure all the people who are your backup people beyond your spouse are good. Probably need to add another backup beyond the couple of people you got on that list as current backups. Again, nothing drastic. Probably a lot of the stuff says the same thing and goes to the same people. And if you have children, you're probably not changing the terms of your trust for your kids. And then does this change affect your retirement plan? Does it necessitate a change in investment strategy? Ideally, it doesn't if you've been working with someone like Rachel and I or the Foster Motley team But it could also be that, hey, the spouse passed away while they were working, right? So that does in fact change their needs because spouse who was the primary income earner is deceased. And, you know, as a couple, you were in savings mode for a long time and you were going to be in savings mode, and now you're not. So now you have to rely on this portfolio to support day-to-day needs. So that is a conversation with the team here at Foster Motley and the client to say, okay, how much do we need? And then Rachel will look at the portfolio and say, okay, I think we need to take less risk, right? Because you were in savings mode. You weren't going to touch this portfolio for 10 or 15 or 20 years, but now you're going to be using it on a day-to-day basis. So, does it make sense to stay in the current home? We've had to have that conversation in the past with clients where this was their family home. The kids were growing up in it, and now things have changed quickly. Do you need to downsize? Do you need to make a move? So again, those are not immediate things, but they're things that may need to be sorted out, in the 6 to 12 month period afterwards when the dust has settled and you can think a little more clearly, and we can help with that, right? Because it's still going to be a lot. It's going to be uncomfortable because you may or may not have had those conversations about, well, what do we do with this house that was our family home? Do we, now that we maybe have to go, I may have to go and sell it. I wasn't thinking about doing that. So those things are areas where you should lean on your team. You should lean on your support group because then you start getting into the potential big decisions category. Or for many of our clients who are retired and have been retired, it's really what works best for you and less about what finances dictate.
That's the part where you kind of get through this flurry of activity. Okay, here's my giant checklist. Here's all the things that I have to do that are kind of quick hitting items, but can add up to a lot. You get to the end of that and you're like, now what? That part can be a little bit more difficult because you're almost goal planning for a whole new financial plan. So it's a new normal, and it's one that isn't very pleasant, and it's hard. So sitting down with your team, it's going to be an evolution. You're not going to come to the answers right away, and we wouldn't want you to, because you don't want to do, like we said, don't do anything rash. These are things that you think about down the line, and it's part of the grieving process. Okay, what is my new reality, my new future going to look like? And we can help talk through those things, but we know it's difficult. So the best thing to do, as we keep coming back to, is we don't like talking about this topic. It's uncomfortable to think about your partner being gone, but you also need to think about, what does my future look like? How can I protect that person? How can I be prepared in a way that can remove some of the stress in what is typically a really hard situation? Sometimes you have line of sight, and sometimes you get surprised. So that's why it's earlier, the better is our general advice.
Well, how can people reach the team at Foster and Motley?
You can reach us either through our website, which is fosterandmotley.com, or you can give us a call at 513-561-6640.
All right, Rachel and Joe, thank you so much for being here. Now, as you have heard, this Foster and Motley podcast about life and wealth offers sensible, practical information for life situations. So for more insightful shows, follow or subscribe. This will make you aware of a new episode when it's ready for you, and share with others. And thanks for being with us.